Hi everyone, JJIR here, and in this video we're going to see the quote-unquote correct methodology for using Google Classroom in relationship to the assignments that we as professors give to students. I have seen a lot of times where students are trying to upload directly their assignments, PDFs, documents, images to Google Classroom. And that is not the most efficient way to do this. In fact, it's probably the least efficient way. So what we want to do here is I want to give a couple suggestions so you can actually use this more efficiently and make sure that the grading that you do in relationship to the students is much more precise and clear and actually better for the students in the long run. So the first thing we want to do is we're going to go to classwork in whatever class we have. It makes no difference. We're going to click on create, and then we're going to click on assignments here. So when we open this up, like typical things, we're just going to go here and we'll put our title. So the first thing I want to mention here is that in relationship to the instructions, the students today are going to presuppose that if you don't mention it, it's not needed, meaning we need to offer more detailed instructions. What does that mean? That means, let's say I'm asking for an essay. We need to not presuppose that the students understand what an essay is, but rather we need to explain what we need in this. For example, I want 10 paragraphs. In each paragraph, I want 5 sentences. In each sentence, I want to make sure that there are periods and commas, all that type of stuff that one would presuppose that someone would know, unfortunately today is not as clear or as taken for granted. So it's important that any instructions that I need for my assignments for the students is very well clarified. It can be here in instructions, or I can have a document like a PDF or something like that, a Google Doc that's only a see only type of thing, to where the students understand very clearly what the instructions are for each assignment that I'm offering the students. This will help out tremendously in the long run, making sure that there is no problems and stress and tension between the student and the professor. I have seen a drastic drop in both complaints in relationship to students and in relationship to parents when the instructions are nice and clear. Even though the instructions might be very long, it makes no difference. It helps tremendously to make sure that the instructions are complete and clear and detailed so that the students and the parents don't have doubts about what exactly is needed from the students to turn in. So that's my first tip. Please make sure that your instructions are extremely clear, and even though they might be long, it's better that they're long than that they're vague. The next thing I would highly suggest, especially if we're dealing with something like a Google Doc, which will be used for an essay, is to add a rubric, making sure, again, that the rubric is detailed enough. And by the way, you can also reuse rubrics now and import them from Google Sheets. Just another small tip here, if you actually create a rubric and then you want to reuse it, you can actually throw that rubric into Google Sheets, modify it again, and then pull it back into another class if you so wish. We can see that in another video, but just so you know, you can play around and actually have all of your rubrics saved in Google Sheets and then pull them from Google Sheets in the future once you have the first one done within a class in Google Classroom. So if we click on the rubric here, the idea I want to underline here is that the criterion should be clear. And that means precisely we don't put criterion that is something like clarity. We have to make sure that the description under that is very detailed and clear as well here to make sure the students understand how they're being graded. So if I'm going to put a title like clarity here, which in and of itself is not very clear, funny enough, the idea here is that in the descriptions, I'm going to make that very detailed. So, for example, if clarity for the teacher means that there's an introductory sentence in each paragraph, I need to underline that here. Clarity means that there's an introductory sentence in each paragraph, and that within the paragraph, the ideas are precise. There's no vagueness. But I need to be as concrete as possible. The word here is concrete, making sure that the more concrete I am with the rubric that I'm going to be adding to my class, much, much easier it's going to be for the students to understand how the professor is going to grade. Not only that, when we enter into the Google Doc to review the essay, it will also help us to make sure that the grading that I'm doing is justifiable. And that word justifiable is very important there, and I'd underline it. If you want to justify something you're correcting in the Google Doc, you need to make sure that both in the instructions and in the rubric, it's very clear what you're going to grade and correct. Okay, so I'm not going to spend time on the rubric now. We can do that in another video if you really need another video to explain how to make a very clear rubric. But for now, we're going to keep on going because this is more of a practical area. So here we're going to click on Add, and we're going to add a Google Doc. We're going to go here to Google Drive, and we're going to add that. So here, once we go, we're going to click on Template Essay, and we're going to add that to our assignment here. The next very important thing that we need to do here is make sure that we click on Make a Copy for each student. This is the one here, Students Can Edit File, is a little bit confusing. Please do not use that unless you really want a whole group of students to be editing a file at once. Most of the time, 90% of the time, you'll probably be choosing Make a Copy for each student so that this template is offered to each student. Now, let's say I already gave all my instructions and whatnot, but unfortunately, many times students still don't read the instructions. So what I often do is within the template that each student is going to receive, I actually add instructions at the top. And then afterwards, the students are going to write their essay below the line that I normally add here. This allows me to have a guarantee that the students do not have the excuse of not knowing what the instructions were, and all the detailed things that I want to offer them, I will put up here. And then I'll tell them even sometimes on the next page, begin your essay. And that guarantees me that they have no possibility of giving the excuse that they didn't know what they needed to do. The only excuse they can give is they didn't want to read. Otherwise, every student will know what the instructions are, even when they open up the Google Doc. So this is normally what I would do to make sure that the students are able to do this in the correct manner and are following the instructions I offer them. So we're going to close this up, and the rest of what we want to see here, we'll see when we start correcting what they offer us. So we'll click on Assign here and then come back. Now, I didn't put any due date or things like that or topics. We can do that in our video, but the idea here is just to focus 100% on how to offer the assignments in the correct manner to make sure that they're corrected in a very precise way. So for right now, we're just going to leave it like that, and then we're going to come back and we're going to see how we're going to correct this once a student fills out one of the essays. So when the student comes in here, the first thing they're going to see is that the template is already under their name. And this will be the same way in Google Drive in the professor's account. So they don't have to start looking for it. They can actually find it within Google Drive, even jumping over Google Classroom if they so wished. So the student just comes in here and then goes under the line here that I gave them, and they'll start writing in their essay. Okay, so now that the student has actually put something in here, he put something in Plato in here, and he's got his citation here below. Everything looks nice. So the student can either click on turn in here. I'm sorry, this is in Spanish, but I've been jumping back and forth today. Or he or she can turn it in from here. I would highly suggest they just turn it in from Google Classroom to develop the habit, because many times when they don't do that, in other circumstances, when they just upload something or they just try to do something, unfortunately, what happens is that they forget to click on turn in. So my suggestion is the students just go back into Classroom and develop the habit of always clicking on the button of turning in. Okay, so now that the student turned that in, this has changed now. We have one turned in. So we can jump in here and actually go into that document. So now we're here, we can actually go directly into the document of the student who turned something in. Okay, so if we had a rubric, the rubric will come down here and we'd actually be able to apply the rubric to this. We can do that a little bit later. But the idea here is that, above all, I wanted to show you the process of putting comments here to make sure that the students understand what they did wrong. So the first thing I would do is if there's something that has to be in a grammatical sense corrected, I would just go straight up here and click on suggesting mode so that the students understand directly what's going on with what's dealt here. So if we go down here, we can actually go and click on this and then put a period, and we can do other things like this just to correct the text and whatnot. But my point here that I want to make is that we should be very detailed in what we're correcting. The students should understand very clearly what's being corrected, and it should have been already previously mentioned in the instructions and in the rubric what is going to be corrected within the text. So there's no surprises, and therefore the students don't get tense because they think it's unjust that something's being corrected out of place. So we want to make sure that, first of all, it's clear what we're going to correct, and second of all, we make sure that we're very detailed in our correcting. If we try to say something in the instructions that should be done and we don't correct it here, the students are going to think that we're not fulfilling our word, and therefore we're going to lose the possibility of having some sort of ascendancy over the students. So we want to make sure that everything's nice and clear. So here, the idea is that after we're done correcting the grammar and syntax and whatnot, we can jump out of this and go back to editing. And then we have what we call the comment bank. The comment bank is very, very good because we can add things here that are very detailed without having to write them out. And it reduces the tension that we have in correcting the stuff the students turn in. So we can actually go here and click on add. So let's say we have something like this. We'll add that to our bank in that case. And then afterwards, let's presuppose that we need this to be more concrete. So we're going to click on this and select it. And just by the way, just as a side point, if you actually put your cursor next to a word and then you click on Control-Alt-M, it automatically will select that and put the comment in. So after we're here in the comments, if we put a pound sign, that will allow us to automatically choose, just with our keyboard, the comments we need to put. So we'll just add this one here and then put comment. As well, if you get rid of that, you put the T, that will automatically go directly to the one that begins with T. You can click on that and then tab and then comment, and you've already made a comment. So you actually don't even need to touch the mouse when you're doing comments like this, and you can have very detailed comments within the comment bank to make sure that this goes more efficiently. But again, underlining, the more detailed I am in my correcting, the better it will be, and the students will accept much, much more the work that I'm doing as a professor in relationship to the work that they do. After finishing off my comments, I can go back up here, put my grade in if I so wish, and then click on return if I do want to do it here, or that will automatically coincide with what is now in Google Classroom, and I can return everything after I'm done by going up here and selecting another student and continuing on with the ones I have here. So that's in relationship to Google Docs, but now we want to see another case scenario in relationship to recording and correcting things that students do. In this next case, we're going to click on assignment again, and then we're going to put an example like, for example, math. Again, we want detailed instructions here. We need to make sure we add a rubric. Okay, right now we're just going to skip that, and then we're going to add. And this time we're going to go back into our drive, but we're going to click on a Google slide as a template. So we'll click on Google Drive here and add the Google slide template. Here again, it's going to be very important that we select make a copy for each student, and then we're going to leave it like that and then click on assign. So now that this is done, we're going to go over to the students and see what they should do. Okay, so now that the student has opened up its slide, what they're going to do is they're going to click on insert, they're going to click on image, they're going to upload that from their device, and they're going to click on the image they took of their math assignment. So after they're done with this, they can actually close this up. So the objective here is that they're taking a picture or video, because we can also do this by video, of anything that's physical that they've done up till now. So that can be a picture, that can be art, that can be anything that requires something physical. That could be a process. Let's say they constructed something or whatever. So the idea here is that anything they could have done physically, a math equation, a tower out of Legos, whatever you want, the idea is that they have evidence by either pictures or video, and then they put that in a Google slide as their assignment. And the idea here is to avoid completely uploading directly anything to Google Classroom, because ultimately what we want is to have a documentation in Google Drive of everything that the students are doing. So now that we have this, we can close it up and go back to the teacher. Okay, so now that the student has finished turning that in, they finished the process of clicking on the button, turn it in their Google Classroom. We go back to the professor. We're going to open this up so we can start grading it. So now we have this, the professor can actually click on this, and we have the same thing. We have the possibility of clicking on Control-Alt-M to putting in a comment using our comment bank, and then putting this on. Now, obviously, this doesn't apply for math, but the idea here is I want to underline this is the correct way to do this in a professional manner, meaning we have the evidence of the student having done their work, and the professor goes in and puts in comments. Now, this is just one thing. What we can do is we have the student put each problem they received on a different slide, so that on each slide, I select the image, and then I go Control Alt M, and then I start making the comments in relationship to each problem that the student did, in order that the student understand why something is out of place or not. On top of that, I can also use lines to point things out, or arrows, just like you would in any other Google slide, so that it looks formal when you're actually correcting something for the student. So I can actually put a line here, and this line could be an arrow and whatnot. It really doesn't make any difference. My point here is that we can use lines, we can use arrows, we can use drawings from Google Drawings, and we can also use images that we ourselves as professors add to this to clarify something. So if the equation wasn't correct, I can actually write out the correct way of doing a problem or an equation, take a picture of that, uploading it, and putting it to the side of the problem that the student did. And then the student has a much clearer way of understanding by comparing the two photos. So this is much more formal, much more professional than what typically happens, which is a student tries to directly upload a photo into Google Classroom, and then the professor has to figure out a way of just making vague comments within Google Classroom. We should avoid that at all costs, and using Google Slides for whatever is not something that we can do in Google Sheets and Google Docs. This is much, much better and a more efficient way of correcting things. And again, this can be done by using pointers, comments, anything you want under or over a Google photo, or a photo that you put into Google Slides or whatever. Oh, look, here Google came out. So going back into what we're stating, so this is the correct methodology. On top of everything else, the advantage here is that I know exactly when the student turned something in by the very fact that when I go to the version history within the Google Slides or Google Docs, I'll know exactly when the student really did this. Whereas the student could actually upload something to Google Classroom and then spend a half hour later to click on the turn in button. So this makes it much clearer when the student did what they did. And in Google Docs, the idea here is that the student does not copy anything in. They write everything out, so I know exactly when the student wrote what they or he or she wrote. So all of this is an added benefit to actually using only Google applications for turning things in, instead of the students trying to upload things directly to Google Classroom, which is what I'm trying to underline in this video to completely avoid whenever possible. Obviously, there's going to be exceptions according to what the school asked for, but I have seen that there is a much higher rate of precision, clarity, professionality, formality, and everything else you want to add to that by doing it this way, instead of trying to directly upload things to Google Classroom. Use Google Classroom just as a front end, and use Google Drive and Google Apps as everything else. Everything you're going to do, this is the way it should be done, so you can have a guarantee of having a history of what you've corrected, a history of what the students turned in, with a much greater precision than you would have had if you allowed the students just to directly upload things to Google Classroom. Keep in mind as well, just to finish this off, that now that the iPads have iOS 13.4, you can actually open up most of G Suite in Safari. You don't necessarily need to use the applications, especially Google Slides, which is much simpler in iOS if you use the app. But if you open up Google Slides and Google Classroom in Safari, as long as your iPad or iPhone is updated to 13.4 and above, then you shouldn't have any problem doing most of this, actually. And it also helps to make sure that everything is more uniform when you're correcting the things the students turned in. So I hope this helps to take better advantage of Google Classroom and Google Apps in general. If you have any questions or comments, please put them in the comment section below. I'll be more than happy to respond to them and make another video in relationship to this if this was too vague, not precise enough. If you have counter arguments by doing this methodology or whatever, I'll be more than happy to take those into consideration and be able to develop something better in the future if it's needed. Otherwise, thank you very much. Please subscribe if you like this, give a thumbs up, and I'll see you in the next one.